Well, good afternoon, Dottie. How we doing today?
Hey, Dr. Clear, we're good. Excited for another fun day. I know we're going to have a great topic. We already have folks joining us on Facebook. It's really going to be a treat today. And, like I said, lots of folks already joining us. I've asked them on the comments, but I'd ask them again. Let us know where you're watching from.
Yeah, absolutely, Dottie. It's good to be back today. We had a couple of days off, and we'll take next week off, and then we'll be back again with another segment. But today we're going to be talking about facilities. We're here in Madisonville, Texas, at the Clear Family Barn, and where my two boys they keep their show cattle. And this is creating success with market steers and breeding beef heifers. And this program is brought to you by Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, as well as the extension agents that are involved with the East Texas Show Star Series, as well as the Southern Classic Workshop Show as well. Those two shows are in East and Central Texas in the fall. Great opportunity. Dottie, I'll be ready to get back to some live shows and some education as we move into the fall, and that's going to be two great opportunities. I'm Dr. Jason Clear, and I'm an extension beef cattle specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension and in the Department of Animal Science. But I'm also a dad to my two boys, and they have show steers and heifers. And we're just going to bring you some of our experiences with the show project and what we've learned. We've had a lot of good presentations, a lot of great questions and answers over the last few weeks during this coronavirus shutdown. And we're looking forward to a good day talking about facilities and controlling the temperature during these hot summers, Dottie.
Absolutely, Dr. Clear. They're in Madisonville. It sounds a little windy, so hopefully the calves are staying cool, and we'll be excited to go in the barn to hear what you got. So, like you said, these last couple of weeks have really been great. We've had a lot of fun. We've talked about everything from selection to feeding, nutrition. We've even talked about opportunities beyond the show ring and how to really take on those opportunities and, unique experiences that young people get through educational presentations and skillathons and other opportunities beyond just showing cattle in the show ring. And so we've really covered a lot of ground, and it's been great getting to work with you and talk with you, Dr. Clear, and also just getting to interact with everyone online. And a huge part of that has been their incredible questions and how engaging everyone's been on Facebook. So as we get started and you start talking about facilities and keeping cattle cool, I want to remind everyone to drop your comments or your questions in our Facebook Live video. We want to hear from you. And as we go along, we're going to be asking and answering questions throughout. And then certainly we'll get to all of them by the end of it. So keep those questions coming. Dr. Clear, it sounds great in there now. Let's get started.
Yeah, and just a reminder, everybody, I think Dottie mentioned it, be sure to share this video with all your friends and everybody else. And the more you share, the more we get out there and can visit with and help other kids that maybe have some questions about their projects as well. And I bet, Dottie, we could probably come up with some goodies as well to give away today. As we're kind of rounding out this school year, many of the seniors are graduating. Our graduation here in Madisonville's tonight, and there's some others. So I bet we can give away some beef cattle short course or Texas Youth Livestock goodies as well today. So be sure to share, and the more you share, the more you get a chance to win some of those, Dottie.
You bet, Dr. Clear. We have folks watching with us from San Antonio, Texas, Manheim, Texas, and lots of other folks joining us who are excited to do that. So like you said, share, comment, and like, and we'll get you some good stuff.
Good deal. So let's get started today. So, the things that we're going to talk about, we've talked about a number of different things from kind of an overview of the project to genetics. We spent quite a bit of time on nutrition because that's so important. We spent a couple days at the wash rack and talking about hair care and those types of things. And then we've also, as we kind of get in today, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, facilities. And then as we get into the summer, the last few days down here in Texas, it's really heated up, and we've been over 95 degrees, and humidity's been up. And so now's the time, as we get into the summertime, it becomes critical to manage that temperature of your cattle so that they'll perform with the most performance they can during these little bit more stressful times on them. And so, you know, just a little bit of history and background on kind of where our facility came about. It started back when my family, we showed shorthorn heifers and steers back when I was growing up. And Mom and Dad, they didn't have a ton of money to spend on the project, but they made do, and they helped us find some good cattle and put in our hands, and we were able to feed them. Facilities, we had just decent facilities. And when I mean decent, they had a roof. And the electricity wasn't the best. The wash rack was outside in the mud. It was a challenge to work through the project. And so as we began, my boys began to express some interest in this project. I made the decision that we would build a barn that would last them throughout their show careers, and it would be functional for them. And that's kind of what we tried to do, is build something that was functional, that kind of addressed all the aspects. And the big thing is that it's not going to do the work for the boys as they do these projects, but it's going to make it easy. And so that's the one thing that we decided. And so we built this barn, and it's a barn that, you know, at the end of their show projects, we can take down the portable panels and those types of things, and that can be in a hay shed or equipment shed. And so we made it a multi-purpose facility with that. And so we're going to talk about some of the, you know, the basics of any kind of barn that you have. And again, it doesn't have to be extravagant. Our barn is really, it's a 50 by 80 foot long barn, and then it's got another 25-foot lean-to off of one side. And it's pretty much everything that we need from a facility standpoint. Some of the things that we do have within this facility that is important is feed storage. Okay, so that's an important thing that you need to think about with your project, is having a feed storage area. And it could be as simple as some trash cans that you put your feed in to keep the raccoons or dogs or cats out of. Or for us, we built an actual feed room that's about a 20 by 20 room. And that's where we keep the feed stored, and that's where the boys mix all their feed up on a daily basis for the cattle. And so we've shown you some of those videos of the feed room. We won't go in there today, but that's in the nutrition talks that we talked about, the kind of the essentials of a feed room there. So that was an important aspect of it. We also have a little area that's inside that's got lights that we have as a shop, but also just a clipping area as well. We can put a trim chute in there, and that's where we clip the boys' cattle as well. Another aspect that's important, so you got a feed room, that's kind of the essential, some place to store feed, you know, a place to house the animals, and we'll show you kind of what we have. And then the other aspect we showed you is a place to rinse those animals as well, and take care of the hair. And it doesn't matter if you're slick-haired or if you've got haired cattle, it's important to have some kind of facility where you can do that. And you can have just a basic facility. I've seen all kinds of facilities. I've seen just those economical portable type buildings that people have used that can be easily erected, and they do a good job. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do. One of the things that we wanted to do in the barn that we built is we wanted everything to be under one roof. And so with that, it's very convenient for the boys. As long as they can get to the barn, everything they need is under a continuous roof. And so if they need to work with them, they can do that with a show stick under the barn. There's wash rack, feed room, everything's under a roof, so it's easy to manage for them. And so those are kind of some of the basics of it. Again, I'm going to take you on a tour of our barn today and what we have. And again, every barn's going to be a little bit different, but this is just kind of what we have with our particular show barn. So the first area we got here, you can see this is a big area right here. And we intentionally left this area open right here. One, we've got a tie rail there. If we need to tie a couple of calves up, the boys can do that there. The other thing that this really acts as in this area is kind of a mini show ring, because if the weather's inclement or during the school year when it typically gets dark a little bit earlier, this is an area that they can go in, and it's not, as huge, but it works for just setting those cattle up a couple of times to practice the showmanship. They can do it under cover in inclement weather, but then they also have lighting as well. So that's what this area right here is, a tie rail, as well as just an area that we can go in and work with them as well. The one way that we designed our facility that was important for us is that we wanted something that was pretty functional and wanted it pretty simple. And so what we have is we've got essentially 5 pins that go across the back of the barn, and those 5 pins turn out into runs. And as you can see, our pins are pretty simple in design. They are either a 10 by 10 or a 12 by 12 pin. And on these younger cattle, we can put 2 head in a pin and they can come and go. And so that 10 by 10 area plus a little bit more is up under the cover of the barn. We can make it to where we can open the gate to get them in. We can open this gate here to turn them out in the evenings. If we want to keep them up during the day, we can. We also have the option that we can just open the gate, and during the summertime or wintertime, they can come and go in and out of the pen as well with that. And so again, it's a 10 by 10 pin right here. You'll notice that we have electric fence runs going out. The perimeter of all of these runs is net wire. And so if one gets out of the hot wire runs, it's going to be contained within that net wire. And so it's a stable fence. But then the runs are about 10 to 12 foot wide, and they go 150 feet out. And they kind of go out down at little hills, so we've got some drainage there as well with that. And some people say, well, why did you choose to utilize hot wire? One of the things and challenges, and we talked about this in the hair care, is during the winter time is when those cattle start to try to lose their hair as we get into February and March, round out our stock show season down here, they start to rub. And so if you've got electric fence hot wire, it makes it a lot harder for them to rub holes in their side or anything like that from a hair perspective. And so that's why we chose to run hot wires, and it works pretty well with that. A couple other functioning things that we have that we utilize here in our barn is that every calf has got a small, what we call a muck bucket or a small tub of water. It can be those that you buy at your feed store. We've got some that were molasses tubs that were given to us as well. But that particular container is probably going to hold about somewhere 15 to 20 gallons of water. During the winter time, you probably just have to top them off once a day. But during this time of the year, in the summer months, the boys, when it's real hot, they've got to fill water both in the morning as well as in the evening with those. Some people like big troughs. The reason that we don't like big troughs is, one, we can monitor the intake of the cattle. We're continually putting fresh water in there for them. They're easy to clean. We try to clean these out about once a week because they're going to spill some feed in them. There's going to be dirt in them, so we try to keep them clean. The other thing is, if you got a big trough, they turn around, they defecate or poop in it, you get that water's contaminated. So here you're just taking out 3 or 4 buckets of water versus a big trough. It's going to be a whole lot more water that you've got to take out of there and clean out. And so it's a pretty easy functional way. But again, everybody wants to do things a little bit different. For us, we just use these smaller troughs as well. Other things that we tried to do to keep things pretty simple with the cattle and make it fairly easy, on a day-to-day basis managing it, is you'll notice we've got some plugs here for our fans. We've got multiple sets of plugs going across. Each one of these plugs is also set up on just a light switch. And that helps because instead of cutting on 4 or 5 fans individually, you can go up and you can just flip that switch and then the fans come on with that. And so that's 2 things. That's a time-saving feature. It's a little easier. You don't wear your fan switches out. But then also we found in the hot, humid days that we get in this part of the world, if there's a lot of humidity in the air and a lot of rain, sometimes those little fan switches will get a little bit of bite to them, And so for us, we like those switches. It's easy to cut them on and off. Easy for the boys to do that as well. Again, we're not trying to take all the work out of the project, but they've got multiple steers they're dealing with on a daily basis. And so anything we can do to speed up the process helps them to where they can spend more time doing other things like working with them with a stick and things like that. And so other things that we do, you'll notice the rubber feed pans. For us, this is what we use to feed the steers and heifers out of. We individually feed almost everything. Right now, we've got a couple of steers that we feed together. They're about the same weight, the same age. They need to be eating about the same. And so we'll feed them together for a period of time. But everything else we feed on an individual basis. We use these, some people call old school rubber tubs. It's the kind I like, so that's what we utilize here in the barn with that. One of the key things is during this time of year is keeping the spilled feed up. We try to pull the feed pans, any kind of spent feed that's in there, we dump it out, and we turn the feed pans over, because if you don't, you're going to attract a lot of flies to the project with those open feed pans. So that's kind of the layout of the pens right here. Dottie, do you have any questions?
Yeah,
out
Dr.
there now?
Clear. Yeah, we're really enjoying the tour of the place, and it's certainly obvious that it's very nice, very functional, and fits your family very well. We can see those runs back there. It looks like great room to roam, lots of room for the cattle to get out if the weather allows. What I'm wondering is, for folks who might not have that availability of space or sheer room back there, what would be a good compromise or something that you could do with a little less room to make your facility feasible in that way?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that, I mean, Dottie, you can get away with maybe a small pen here, and you go out another 20 feet or so out there, and that's probably, or another maybe 100 feet out, and that would be plenty of room for them to go. The only difference is that the smaller the pen you have, the more time you need to spend exercising those animals. And so think of it as at a show. When we go to a show, those animals are pretty much tied up all day. So we take the time and effort while we're at the show to do some exercising twice a day to get those cattle out and move them around. So I guess what I would say is, you could probably get away with a facility that's maybe 30 or 40 foot long and 12 foot wide, but you probably need to spend a little more time leading those cattle, walking, exercising them to make sure they get enough exercise to keep the skeleton mobility intact there. And that brings up another question. The boys have got a couple of September heifers from last year that are coming 2-year-olds. And those heifers are they're in the right condition now. And so we have them actually in an even bigger area. We put those older heifers in the biggest area we can, because it gives them even more exercise to move around, because they tend to want to get a little fat on us if we keep them up, even in these smaller runs right here with that. So great question, Dottie.
Yeah, Dr. Clear, that was a great explanation, and we certainly appreciate it. Had another question come in regarding those electric fences. Do you have any recommendations for keeping younger or naive calves from tearing those up or getting used to electric fences?
Yeah, great question, Dottie. The downside of the electric fence is you will occasionally, they're going to get out in them, and that's why we have that perimeter fence all the way around in case we do. For the most part, we seldom have any problems. Last year, the boys had one steer that didn't matter how well the electric fence worked. Even when it was wet, and it was working really well, that crazy steer would just walk right through the electric fences. And so we did have that challenge. But I think the biggest thing is make sure your electric fence is grounded properly with a good ground. It's a high quality electric fence as well. You can buy cheap ones, but from experience, they typically don't last very long, and they don't have the output, and you're going to have more problems. And the other thing is just try to keep your fence up. I mean, we run the tape wire. The plastic poly wire is what we utilize. The challenge with the poly wire, we can probably get about 2 years out of it before we have to replace it all again. I like it over the metal wire because in case we have to do a clean out, it's easier to do. As far as getting young cattle adjusted to it, those runs are real long. And so what we will do is, if we've got some that have never been around electric fence before, we will take and shorten that electric fence some. Because what happens is, if you turn them out here after they've settled in a couple days and turn them out into that hot wire, they're going to take and run as fast as they can and kind of buck, and they'll run straight through the fence. So if you shorten it a little bit and actually put somebody on the other end of it where it kind of there's a visual, they'll kind of ease up to that hot wire and it'll zap them on the nose, and typically that's good enough. So you just kind of have to take them gradually with it. Usually we don't turn them out into the hot wire runs when they first arrive on the place. For 2 or 3 days, we let them settle in, and then we just kind of open the gate and let them ease out, and it usually works well. So great question.
Excellent, Dr. Clear. Like I said earlier, we have lots of folks watching with us, lots who are interested. We have folks watching from Millsap and Perrin, Texas, even down in Refugio. So all those folks watching, just want to remind you to like, comment, and share this post. The more you do, then your friends can watch along with us and ask their questions as well. So keep those questions coming. Dr. Clear, the next one has to do with fly control. And I know you mentioned, keeping your feed and water buckets clean and that type of thing. Is there anything more that you do around your facility to help with fly control?
Yeah, it's becoming that time of year, and with flies. And I don't care if you're in West Texas or over here in southeastern Texas, the fly population is really amping up. The things that we do, it's kind of a holistic fly control, all-out battle, because flies, we've mentioned it a time or two, is that you want to control the flies because, one, if you get a heavy fly population, those cattle are constantly moving, they're fighting those flies, they're expelling energy, they're just not going to perform as well with the flies irritating them. The other thing is those flies will irritate the hide of those animals, and so you're not going to have as good a hair quality or hide quality if you've got cattle that are slick sheared, or maybe some Brahman or Santa Gertrudis or Beefmaster cattle, which you don't show with hair on them. And so it's important to control the flies, because if not, you will get fly bites and irritations, and those cattle just don't look as fresh. So controlling the fly population is critical. Now, here under your barn, we do have typically some horn flies, but not a lot. And the horn flies are typically what you would see out on your cows out in the pasture. What we have here under our barns and around our houses are typically more of the house flies or face flies. And those can be a challenge. And so what we do to control them first is feed. We make sure we pick up the feed, any kind of spilled feed, turn the feed pans over. We've got all that picked up. We haul the manure off. So as you look around, you could see we try to keep things as clean as possible around here. The other thing is our feed room is enclosed. And so we'll spill feed in the feed room, but again, we have the doors closed, and we can keep the fly populations down and from going in there as well. Feed is probably your #1 battle with attracting those flies into your barn. The other thing that we started doing a year ago is we feed a feed-through product. And a product we utilize is Justifly. It is a feed additive, and so you feed it to the animal, and it essentially kills the fly larva when the flies actually lay those larvae in the manure piles. And so it's a feed-through product. The key thing on that product is that you got to start them on it early enough. Try to get a month before fly season begins with that product. What we do is we mix that product with our mineral that we add to the calves feed. There are, I know, a couple of different feed companies that are making that product in a pellet additive form that's got some protein as well as some other minerals, and it's already got the feed through fly product in it. and that works. People are seeing success with that as well. The key thing is, if you use any of those, if you use a feed through that is not labeled for house or face flies, you're not going to see a lot of benefit up under the barn here and around the barn with that. So we do a feed through. We will occasionally have to use some pyrethrins, some spray on insecticides. If we do see a kind of a bump in population, we try not to use a lot of that if possible. And then if we see an explosion of flies, we will use some bait stations on top of it as well. So it's, I wish, Dottie, there was just a silver bullet, but it's just kind of a, all encompassing. And from, April all the way until October, it's a battle in our part of the state. And so it is a challenge, but again, if you do a number of things you can do, and you can keep those fly populations down. Good question.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Clear. We want to see the rest of your facility. I want to hear about those fans and that Porta Cool.
Yeah.
Real quick before we get there, I think you can answer this one real quickly. If you could just reiterate, we had a question about what time of day is best to turn the heifers out in those runs.
Yeah, great question. And so that actually, Dottie, that leads right into kind of our next discussion as we finish looking at the facilities is, controlling the temperature in these cattle. And so the time of day really is dictated by the time of year. And so during the cool months, the boys may be able to finish up out here at the barn 6, 7 o'clock, and the cattle are turned out at that period of time. During this time of the year, as it's really heating up, it's warming up, we will typically wait to turn those cattle out as we get into probably closer to 8 o'clock. We'll turn the fans off. Occasionally, if we've got some steers or heifers that are a little more susceptible to the heat, we may even leave a fan on overnight so that they continue to have some breeze blowing across. So for our schedule this time of year, we're typically, those cattle are getting turned out close to 8 o'clock, and then we bring them in somewhere around that 7 o'clock in the morning whenever they're fed with that. And so that's kind of our schedule. It varies a little bit. During the cooler months, we can go in and we can turn them out a little bit earlier. This time of year, it's a battle with the heat. And so we wait till the sun goes down and it cools off a little bit before we begin to turn them out as well. All right, just a couple other things to show you on the facilities. And we talked about in our previous episode, we talked about the wash rack. And as you can see, our wash rack here that we built, concrete is a beautiful thing. And it is really helpful if you've got some access to concrete for the wash rack. We built ours, and it's somewhere around 20 by 13. A good size to wash one head at a time. With that, everything drains forward into a trough, and so the kids aren't standing in water or anything like that. We've got plenty of electricity there as well. They've got a couple of double blowers on top of it with that. And so that's kind of the wash rack. That's where a lot of activity is spent this time of year, and also in the winter time as well. Some of the other things that we have within the barn, because the boys have show steers, and so one of the things that's important is weights. And so as you can see, we've got a scale set up here as well. It's just a platform scale. We walk the steers on and get a weight. We like to back the steers back off of that scale because at some of the major shows, they don't have ramps going up to those scales. And so if you back them off, it tends to save some dew claws and some problems with those cattle. So we begin to train them with that. But we've got a set of scales so that we can monitor performance. During the summertime, we weigh about every 2 weeks. During the wintertime, as we get close to the majors and target points, we weigh those cattle about once a week. Couple other different things. We've got a number of different pens that we utilize, just fans, butt fans, and there's a number of companies that make good quality fans with those. But we've got some Porta Cools or evaporative coolers that we utilize as well. And those evaporative coolers just circulate water through these cells there, and the air blows across them, and they do a good job of cooling things. When the humidity kicks up real high in this part of the state, they don't work as effective. But when we get into the hot and dry part of the summertime, they're very effective, and they'll drop that temperature considerably with that. You know, some people will use misters and different things. We found that the Porta Cools are very effective. We bought one new when the boys started showing, and then I found some good deals on some on Craigslist. If you look for those Porta Cools, you can find some used ones that are very reasonable. They're pretty simple in their design. It's just a fan motor and a pump that circulates that water. And so there's nothing complicated about them, but they are a very effective tool as well. You'll notice that we've got plugs for all of those. One key thing is you try to keep those plugs and cords away from the cattle, because they will get bored and they will chew on things, and you'll get an electrocuted calf. And so be sure to pay attention to that. Again, over here on this side, we've got the same number of pins, or we got 3 pins here, and then we've got a bigger turnout pin that goes this way for us. But again, this is kind of our facility design and what works with us. We have good lighting during in the barn as well, and that's important during the winter time, when most of the time that the boys are out here at the barn, it's going to be dark. So I'd encourage you to have some kind of lighting in the facility as well. And so that's kind of our facility. We've got an area over here to the side where we store hay as well, and it works good because everything's under one roof with that. And so that's kind of the facility design. Any questions you had on facilities before we kind of talk about managing, keeping these cattle cool during the summertime?
Yeah, I think we're all really anxious to hear about that. One thing I noticed as part of your facility in keeping it cool, and I'm sure you're going to get that way, but is that tarp or shade that's kind of hung up over on the edge. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done, and we're working on replacing a couple more, so we'll have them on all the sides of the barn. They do wear out, but these shade cloths, and you can see we just put this one up about 2 weeks ago, but that's some inexpensive shade cloth that runs the length of the barn, and that's a 5 foot wide by 50 foot long piece of shade cloth. It's very inexpensive. We got it shipped in, looked on Amazon, and it was about $50 for that piece of shade cloth. And you'll probably get at least 5 years out of it. We ran a couple cables across there, pretty easy. We'll also do one on the west side, and just to try to keep those early morning sun as well as the evening sun off of them as well. The other thing is it keeps the barn a little darker as well. And keeping that sunlight out, I think, sometimes helps with stimulate that hair growth as well with those cattle. So if you can kind of keep it darker in here, that's certainly going to help keep the temperature down as well. And so those shade cloths work real well because the breeze can still blow through them, but they're not going to let those direct sun rays come in as well. So that's one of the things that we do to help keep the temperature down on those cattle. You know, when you're managing the temperature of these cattle this time of year, and I don't care if you're in West Texas or up north, you know, during the days it can get hot, you know, across the southern portion of the U.S. During the summertime here where we are, our biggest priority is keeping the cattle cool and comfortable. And that's especially true for the steers. The heifers, we're working on still trying to maintain some hair, even grow a little hair to get ready for our state and junior nationals. But the steers, we're really focusing on trying to keep them gaining and performing well. One of the things, some things that you can do to keep them cool, a simple thing is if they've got a lot of hair and they're suffering from the heat, shear them down and shear that hair off. And I know that may work against if you want to do some jackpot shows and stuff during the summertime, but I've worked with kids and families that have said, no, I'm not going to shear the hair off because we want a jackpot. And you get around to the end of summer and those cattle just are way behind. because they have not eaten well. They haven't performed as well with that. You will find that every animal is a little bit different in how much they can tolerate the heat. There's some steers that, they'll lay out in the sunshine with it in the heat of the day, and it doesn't bother them. The boys have got one steer this year that he drinks a lot of water just trying to keep his body temperature down. So everyone's a little bit different with that. And so, shearing them down, if you've got one that's not taking the heat, you could shear those cattle down. That keeps them cool in the summertime. That's an effective way. We've got fans. We've got Porta Cools where we try to keep the air flowing. Our barn is real high and open to help bring the air in and keep the hot barn metal away from those cattle. If you've got a barn that's low to the ground, that heat's going to build there. And so I know some families have gone and you can get that spray-in insulation there that works well in trying to buffer some of that heat too. Other things that we do, we bring those cattle in before it gets hot in the morning and get them under the fans. We feed them early like that before it gets too warm so that they'll eat. They stay in the barn all day long. And then those cattle, what our practice now is, because it's heating up here, the steers, they go to the wash rack, they're rinsed. We blow them forward to blow most of the moisture out. We kick them back into their pen in front of the fans, and we feed them right then. And at that point, they're cooled off, their body temperature's lower, and they want to eat at that time. And so that's an effective practice. Then we'll turn them out, like I said, as we get close to dark. If we've got some cattle that are a little more susceptible to the heat, even the hot, humid nights we have here in southeastern Texas, we may run a fan across their run all night. With the fans, be prepared for an electric bill, because it can get expensive from that. But there are ways, simple things that you can do, Dottie, that'll help, bring the temperature down on those cattle and to keep them cool and comfortable. I mean, there's different products and things. They say if you feed them, it reduces the body temperature and this and that. And I don't know, maybe they do. I don't know if there's any scientific evidence with that. But I'll tell you some things that do. Bringing them up, feeding them early, turning them out late at night, cooling their body temperature down in the afternoon so that you put them in front of the fans and they'll stay cool and they'll be comfortable and want to eat and perform for you. So that's kind of some of my tips. Any questions on that, Dottie?
Yeah, right now I'd just like to remind everybody watching with us that we have a real expert right in front of us, and your questions are going to get answered. So get them in those comments, and we'll certainly ask them. One that I have, Dr. Clear, and one that we mentioned earlier, I can't remember which session, but was about neck wraps. Can you expand a little on that and let us know what you think about cooling or any types of tips or tricks with those?
Yeah, so, we hear neck sweats is what they're commonly called, and they're a neoprene wrap that goes around the neck. The thought process behind it is if I put that neck sweat on them, they're going to sweat up under that, and it's going to begin to shrink some of that neck. So it'd be just a similar concept in humans where they wrap them in plastic and the body gets hot, they sweat out, and they lose that moisture and the neck gets a little smaller with that. Similar concept, and they are effective and they do work. The challenge you get is if you've got your cattle, and let's just say it's summertime, July here in southern Texas, and sometimes we don't get out of the low 80s at night with humidity that could be close to 100%. You put that neck sweat on them, and yes, they're going to sweat their neck, but their body temperature won't go down, and they're going to pant, and they're going to be hot all night long, and they're just not going to perform. So they do work. We utilize them on certain animals that may have just a little extra skin there in their neck. They're not going to take a big thick-necked animal and make it into a little deer neck looking calf, but they do help some. You just got to be careful when you use them. If it's extremely hot, I probably wouldn't put one on them because that animal's going to heat up and it's going to be more stressful for them.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Clear. You mentioned the area in your barn where your boys work their calves, and I know that young people across the state are spending countless hours with their livestock, working them and things like that. In terms of keeping animals cool and, getting the best performance out of them, but also helping them learn and adjust to that type of thing, what time of day do you think is best, and maybe for how long with each animal, with working the animals during the summertime?
So great question. Like I said, the exercise just depends on the size of your area. So kind of the strategy that we will do with the boys is on their project is after they feed them, they're cooled down, then they will take them out later in the evening before they turn them out for the day, and they'll do some walking. They'll work with them with a stick. They don't necessarily do every animal every single day with the show stick because they've got 5 steers in the barn and I guess there's 5 heifers, and so doing each one of those every single day would take a large amount of time. So what they do is they try to rotate that, but just try to do it, especially this time of year when it's as cool as possible. If you want to do it first thing in the morning, that's perfectly fine. What we like to do is we like to have them fed though before we try to work with them with a stick and show them, because they're going to be more content. If you come out and that morning, instead of feeding them right away, you go and work with them with a stick, show stick, they're probably not going to act as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Clear. Something I'm wondering and really interested in, and something I think is really cool about this project, is that with enough hard work and, the right feed and nutrition and, the certain things that go along with it, with a lot of elbow grease, folks from all sorts of backgrounds and with any type of cattle can really excel in this project area and learn a lot along the way. What I'm considering is people with different types of facilities. Maybe they're at, a school barn or a county facility. What would be 3 things that you would tell people that no matter what type of facility you have, you could do these types of 3 things that would really help you excel in terms of keeping your cattle cool, comfortable, and kind of performing at their best?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what kind of facility you have. There's some strategies. The bare bones minimum during the summertime is having hopefully you have some electricity and can run a fan. That air circulation is going to make a big difference. If you don't have access to a Porta Cool, you may have to go to a little extreme and you may have to keep those cattle sheared during the summertime, but there's ways to do it. A good family friend that we met when we were out and when I was going to Texas Tech and for my PhD, a family friend that we had that I helped out with was a family that they kept their projects at the little school facility. And when I mean little school facility, it was little school. Again, there's probably 15, 20 people in a class in that school. So very small school facility out in the middle of a cotton patch, literally. But that's where they kept their projects. They had electricity there. The one thing that they did, they had fans, but they also occasionally throughout the day, a couple of times, they would go out there and they'd put ice towels on those cattle. And it was a way to cool those cattle down during the daytime. Not a real elaborate facility, very functional. They had the basics. They went through the extra effort of going out there and putting some ice towels on the backs of those cattle a couple times a day. That family was an extremely successful family. They had champion steer at Fort Worth. They had many breed champions, and they also had a champion steer at Houston as well. And I'm talking about champion overall. And so they made do with a minimal facility that was very functional. They went out of the way. They did some extra elbow grease, and they were very successful in what they do with that. So even though you may not have the most extravagant facility, the little extra effort will go a long way with that.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Clear. We still have, a lot of folks watching with us on Facebook. Right now, I'd like to remind them to like, comment, and share this post so everyone can see it. I'd also like to remind them that we've been doing quite a bit of these together. We've had a lot of fun during our coronavirus separation, but we've been able to stay connected and also learn a lot along the way. We've talked about selection and feed and nutrition, health, hair care, and of course now about facilities. I'd like to remind everyone that they can watch those previous recordings. We have them posted online at www.texasyouthlivestock.com. There they can find all of those recordings that you've talked about. They can also find some really cool shearing or clipping demonstrations that you did over cattle. And they can find a lot of other resources on beef cattle or other species that they're showing as well. So just want to put that in, and I'll kick it back to you, Dr. Clear, to wrap us up, or any last thoughts on the facility and keeping cattle cool.
Yeah, thanks, Dottie. Yeah, it's great that we've got those recordings there. One recording that y'all just added this week was something we did before we started this segment. We did a slick shearing demonstration where we went through tips and techniques when you're shearing. And myself and my son, we slick sheared one of their leftover steers that didn't get to make the trip to Houston, but we still had it around. So we went through that process. So that one's up, plus a lot of these that we broadcast live. And so again, just to reiterate the things that we've talked about, guys, there's a lot of different ways to manage the show cattle. A lot of different types of facilities. This is the facility that my boys have and that we utilize, and it works for us. You may look at it and say, well, I don't like that. Well, this is what we use and what works for us. And the boys have been very successful with both market steers and heifers, and have had many breed champions with that in their show career. And so we do what works best for us. The one thing we try to do is keep things simple, stick to the science and what we're doing, and just manage. And Dottie, as you said, you may not have the most extravagant facilities, but if you work hard at it, put the effort in, you can be successful with these projects.
Great, Dr. Clear. We had one really good point. It's not so much a question, but potentially a good tip or trick for others listening, and that's one of our friends in Extension even saying that they wet the ground of their facilities to help keep it cool. What would you say about that? We even try to do it, at livestock shows to help minimize dust. I just think it's a good point that maybe everybody could benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. When we wetting that ground down, keeps the dust down, keeps it pretty cool. The one thing you want to be careful with is that, excuse me, if you get too much moisture in that and they stay wet all the time, the actual animal does, you can get some fungus. So for us, it's kind of case by case. So we've got a Hereford steer over here, the one that drinks a lot, he pees a lot. His pen naturally stays pretty wet. The other ones stay pretty dry, so we'll wet them down. So that definitely is something that helps. One of the things that we didn't talk about, Dottie, when you mentioned wetting that ground, the bedding that we utilize is cedar shavings or cedar fiber. We like it. It smells good. It lasts a long time. The cattle stay fresh on it as well. So, but good tip, keeping things wet down, keeps the dust down, keeps things cool as well.
Excellent. Dr. Clear, well, it's been another great session. Like we said, we have lots more for people to watch. We're going to keep doing this. So we'll be together not next Thursday, 2 Thursdays from now, on Thursday, June 4th. And I know it's going to be another great time together, learning a lot more. In the meantime, go ahead, watch those other recordings on TexasYouthLivestock.com. Also follow our Facebook page. That's the one we're watching live at right now. It's Texas Youth Livestock and Agriculture. And there we post lots of resources. We post worksheets. We post other resources related to other species, and lots of tips and tricks and videos from experts just like you, Dr. Clear. So I want to remind everyone to do that, and also want to remind them to join us 2 Thursdays from now on June 4th. I know it's going to be a great session. Maybe you have a little insight or a teaser maybe about what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I think the next session we're either going to talk about some managing a healthier project, or we're going to get into some fine tuning on on our showmanship skills there. So as we get closer to that, we'll let you know what we're going to talk about. But we look forward to it, Dottie.
Absolutely. Regardless of what it is, it's always useful, it's always fresh, and it's always something that folks can really use at home. So we appreciate you for that, Dr. Clear. Until then, on June 4th, see ya.
Thanks, Dottie.
Bye.